All right, so we're talking about marketing today. And the more I thought about this, and you're going to see this come out soon, that this is really not so much about, it's really about networking. So you're going to find that kind of come out in our discussion today. This is, in the pre-conference workshops, this is the topic that Laura takes on. And it's largely because she knows a lot more about it than I do from personal experience. And so since I've been doing the e-study and the Summer Evaluation Institute, and when I do workshops for the affiliates, this is a big topic. A lot of people want to talk about it, and so I've really spent a lot of time thinking about it. And what you're going to hear today is kind of a complete redo on what I typically do, which is just steal Laura's material and try and represent it as best as I can. But that didn't feel very original, so we're going to try something else out today. But I do want to give special recognition to her because she turned me on to Dan Pink, one of the main books that informed today and my thoughts about this. And if you ever get a chance to talk to her about marketing, you should definitely do so because she's got a lot of great ideas and she has a wonderful perspective. And of course, I always want to say thank you to Gail, who got us all started with this in this world. You know, she's the one who really pushed to have workshops and pre-conference sessions and things like that. But to start marketing off, we should probably start by talking about the 2015 ICTIG survey, where we had about 300 respondents. And we asked about a whole lot of different things, but we definitely asked about effective marketing approaches. And so, you know, I think we had 15 items, but we took, and this is all in, by the way, this is all in the 2019 December issue of New Directions for Evaluation. We had a whole article on the survey, so if you want to look at that up, that's out there. But the TIG survey, we looked at the best we kind of identified the best marketing approaches. And so the #1 approach would be actively soliciting new work from your past clients. So when you see 93%, that's of the people who completed the survey and that answered that question. Those are people who said that they had significant success or some success. And the second one is actively soliciting referrals from past clients. So there's a theme here. The top two, by far, are talking with people you know. And so I think if there's one thing to learn, and I think this is going to be themed throughout this day, and if you talk to anybody in this business, it's really about relationships. The third one is responding to RFPs, and then presentations and trainings and speaking, and pro bono and volunteer work. So the RFPs is an interesting piece because when we dived into these data, we found that there's two outlets on RFPs. One is, are you responding to RFPs that are kind of sent to you, or are they RFPs that you're working on with someone else, as you'd be the evaluator subcontractor on a bigger project. When you dive into it, the people who, in the secondary case where you're brought in as the evaluator for a bigger project, there's a lot of success, and that actually kind of may actually fit under some of the actively soliciting new work from past clients or referrals. So where's my mouse? I'm trying to point it out. But there's a lot of people who will say they don't have very much success at all in responding to requests for proposals that are not at all, you know, that are just broad, that you're just responding to somebody you don't really know. Now we get into the next piece, the least successful marketing approaches. I guess people would say the least successful marketing approach would be direct mail, just sending out brochures through the mail to potential clients. Then networking, vendor booths at conferences, email marketing, and referrals from a website or blog. Now, I should be cautious to say that I was saying. All right. So when we think about marketing, Dan Pink likes to talk about the ABCs of marketing. And the original ideas around ABCs are from that Glengarry, Glen Ross ideas of Alec Baldwin would say ABCs are, always be closing, this is a very hard sales approach, kind of the used car salesman perspective, but I don't think it's relevant today. I think that this, I think that we are in a tightly networked community. We often know our clients, and our clients know other potential clients, and they know other evaluators, and it's not relevant today. We should be thinking about attunement, buoyancy, and clarity. And attunement is that idea that we're connected to our clients, that we're paying attention to them, that we see things happening because we're tightly coupled with them in a classic sense. Buoyancy is this idea that not everything works out. We have grit, that we continue on, that we push forward, even though we see not everything's going to work out. I mean, I think that's the big idea. And clarity is that perspective that it sounds like it's attunement, but it's a little bit different. It's a deep consideration for the problems that need your attention. It's knowing to ask the right questions. Well, let's take some of those ideas, and I'll tell you what I think. I felt a little bravado when I put this presentation together, and I think these are the 5 things that I think of when I talk about marketing and networking, because for all intents and purposes, all of my networking has some element of marketing to it. And all of this is related to the big idea of getting some sales, right? Of involving myself with other people in different ways, including you all, that could potentially turn out to develop my business in some way. And development means a lot of things, but a lot of it means bringing in additional opportunities to serve clients in the ways that my business is set up to through the niche ideas we talked about last week. So we're talking about finding and building relationships. We're about creating karma around our networking, actively engaging ourselves, keeping our ear to the ground and finding problems, and then cultivating those new opportunities. And I have 2 pieces to each one of these. So first of all, we got to start and realize that we're a part of a social network. And if you've done any social network analysis, you'll understand this, that there are people who have a lot of power and have a lot of connections, and a lot of the lines between people. Some of them are thicker and some of them are thinner, but you want to be as heavily integrated into the social network as possible for your opportunity to serve your clients, to live out your dreams and pursue your niche, as we talked about last week. Now, pro bono doesn't necessarily fit here, but I think it's always something I want to talk about, that we have the opportunity to create. And I also have to say, there's I know a lot of you are very new into the independent consulting practice, and so you're looking for ways to get out there and create relationships. And so through the social network, you're going to immerse yourself in it. You're going to create informational interviews, work with your potential clients or potential competitors. Like if you are in the Atlanta area, you could easily see Ann Price as one of your competitors because she's fantastic at what she does. But on the other end of things, she's the kind of person who wants to get to know you. She's not a competitor in the truest sense. And a lot of us will say there's no real thing as competitor in our world, because there's always new opportunities that we can develop. But pro bono work is an interesting way to go about creating your first relationship with a client. I don't suggest working for free without any constraints, because you can be taken advantage of. But when you are first starting out, a pro bono opportunity is one where you can work for a client for a defined period of time for a defined project. You want to carefully tell them what your worth is and what you're providing to them. But it could lead to paid work. It gives you experience, and it introduces you into the social network. And so you can start to learn some more about what other people are doing. And pro bono work does not stop after you've become first involved. I did pro bono work actually for a current client for a project that I used to do for pay, but that's because I saw a big opportunity down the road. And I said, we can't lose contact with this just because they've lost funding. I think there's funding down the road, and I want to help them find it. And I'll talk about that offline during the discussion period, because I don't want to take up too much time to tell that story. As we're out there developing our relationships, as we're thinking about ourselves within this social network, know that there's karma involved. And this is a phrase that I just heard at a speech by somebody that was associated with my university. But he started talking about this book by Keith Ferrazzi. And Keith Ferrazzi talks about social arbitrage. And so arbitrage is a funky word, and it has a lot to do with taking over businesses. But in this sense, social arbitrage is becoming indispensable by strengthening your connections with people. Knowing that, and he talks about Vernon Jordan, who was, I don't know what his official relationship is with Bill Clinton, but he's been a power broker in Washington, D.C. for years, and he doesn't file a brief, he doesn't do anything like that. What he does is he makes connections for people, and he's made himself indispensable to the power brokers in Washington, D.C. He creates relationships amongst people who can develop things and make things happen. And just by being involved, being engaged, being with your clients, with a group of people who are like-minded, with your local affiliate, within your TIGs, these are ways that you can make yourself available to others. But the important piece is not keeping score, right? You don't do things for people with expectation that they will, you don't say, well, if I do this for you, then you will do that for me. That's not the way to go. Now, that creates an imbalance of a relationship. And doesn't that feel weird to you? It feels weird to me if somebody says, if I do this for you, won't you do this for me? Scratching the back philosophy. That's not to say that people won't do things for you. It's the fact that you start creating those conditions, and it kind of takes your social relationship in a weird direction. But the fact that you will give of yourself freely and make yourself indispensable to people, and people want to come to you, that's where the real opportunities open up. Because at some point you want to put together a big idea, and I'm doing this right now with Evaluation Association of St. Louis. We're trying to put together a big conference that's going to be virtual. And so once you've created these relationships, you can say, hey, why don't we do these fantastic things? And people will be happy to support you. The third piece is actively engagement. You want to actively engage with your clients. So this is, I think, somewhat hard for a lot of us because we think of ourselves as, a lot of evaluators think of themselves as introverts. They like sitting behind their computer. If you're like some people I've talked to recently, they've loved this COVID-19 time because they didn't have to go out. They could stay home. They had to stay home to be safe, but to be honest, they felt very comfortable with that. You need to find ways to just not sell. This is not about direct selling. This isn't about trying to, and oftentimes I will go see my clients just because, for the longest time, it was just me, and I was lonely, and I wanted to have some involvement with people. So if there was a meeting going on, and there was any reason for me to be there, I would go just so that I could go connect with them and just know what was going on. And of course, it was good for my evaluation. Could I have zoomed in? Absolutely. But if I can be there in person, I think that there's just something natural and fantastic that happens with all of that. There's a lot of magic, I call it like that magic time that happens when you're just sitting there talking about your dogs and your kids, and you're talking about life in general, and then invariably this happens. Your client or somebody will say, I was just thinking, why don't we pursue this one project? Did you know about X, Y, and Z? Have you talked to that client down the road? Because I think they could really use your services. And you can't plan for these things. You can try, but the reality is a lot of these things happen just through the natural interaction that we have with people. And secondarily to this is you need to understand that as we're developing these relationships and we're going after opportunities, things don't work out. You need to have some level of grit or buoyancy, as Dan Pink talks about it. I currently have a list of nearly 20 submitted proposals, which is fantastic, and we're excited about it. But I'd be surprised if 5 get funded. Every one of them is good. Every one of them is for the people who are putting these things together. Most of these are most of these I'm just the subcontractor for, but you know, every one of them was months of planning, and they you know, they've got professional grant writers, but I just know that the reality, particularly with the National Science Foundation, less than a quarter of them get funded. And so of the 20 that I'm looking at right now on my board over here, 5, well, maybe 5 will get funded, and that's just the reality. As you're looking at your network of people, you need to just pay attention and think and listen. Now, I consider myself an extrovert, and I suppose that seems to be a real advantage, but the reality is I think the introverts among us are actually the best at this, because as an extrovert, I want to hear myself talk because it's the way that I think, and it's just the natural order of how an extrovert operates. But the introverts are actually better at this because they contain their thoughts and they're better at listening. And so I have to work very hard to listen to what my clients are saying. Secondarily, and Ella can appreciate this, is we need to follow the ideas from Rodney Copperbottom from Robots. Didn't you guys all watch that movie? Actually, I bet nobody's watched that movie. It's the best cartoon movie that you've never seen. Rodney Copperbottom always says, see a need, fill a need. And it's just the line that runs throughout it. And so if my daughter becomes fantastic at sales someday, or the work that we're doing, it's because she watched this movie at least 500 times between the ages of 2 and 12. And so it would run on continuously in the minivan as we drive back and forth to daycare. But it's true. As you're sitting there and you're listening, at some point you're going to be able to start to connect the dots amongst the different people in your community. As you become more and more involved and you become connected to people, perhaps you become a connector. You can see relationships that need to be developed, and so you see those needs and you fill them. And that's why recently my company ended up developing a grant proposal, which turned out to be for my company, that took a group out of Chicago that does summer camps together with this whole community that I know that's of military connected school districts. They were looking for each other, and I was the matchmaker. I was the Vernon Jordan of that situation, and we're waiting to hear if that proposal is funded. And if it did, it'll be a big deal. Finally, you need to cultivate your new opportunities, and I can't stress this enough. When something is beginning and it's in those infant stages, you get involved. Invite yourself to the meetings. Be there. Now, from the evaluation perspective, of course you want to be there, because they're making decisions on goals. They're talking about their smart objectives. They're perhaps putting together a logic model, and all of this informs your evaluation plan. But the real reason that you want to think about this from the marketing side of things is this is when the budgets are being developed. And I'm not saying you should do it for inappropriate reasons, but a lot of us complain that we don't have a large enough budget for what we do, but if you're there early enough, you can say, this is what I need, and they can develop that into their budget from an early stage, and you don't have to fight for it at a later stage. Plus, this is where kind of when people are first formulating things, this is where there's really a lot of opportunity for you to say, this is what we should be doing and what we could be doing, and you can be thinking long-term for them, because they're not always thinking super long-term. They're thinking about, what do I do to get the dollars in the door so that we can make this thing happen. And lastly, I'd like to suggest that you allow yourself to be insane on a limited basis. And what I mean when I say limited insanity is that sometimes you just need to buckle down and work all night long. You need to work the weekends. I don't advocate this very often, but when something happens, and it doesn't always happen on a planned basis, but when you see that opportunity, that golden opportunity, you just need to buckle down. And we recently did this when we went after that big grant I was talking about from the Department of Defense about military connected school districts and summer camps. And we just worked like crazy long hours. Now, I'm going to advocate for on a regular basis that you get 8 hours of sleep, that you eat well, and I do all these things, and that you eat healthily, and you exercise and do all the things you're supposed to do. And because you're doing those things, you can from time to time just allow yourself to go completely off the rails, insane with work, and just focus and work hard, because that's when a lot of your best work is going to happen, particularly in the development sense. All right, so we're going to go into the discussion period, but I do want to remind you that we are meeting for several weeks. I think I'm scheduled to do this all through July. These are all free sessions, and the upcoming sessions will be on, next week will be on setting your fees, and then the week after that we'll be talking about tiny habits. And then after that, it'll be up to you guys. I'll create sessions around your interests. And if you're interested, here are the two books that, there's a lot that informed what I talked about today, but these are the two ones that I think were the most influential.